Hello and welcome to Hey Look at My Thing with Aaron Irons, Keegan Reynolds, and Rachel Bennett. On this podcast, we share things we're enthusiastic about with our friends. And this week, we will be sharing JoJo's Bizarre Adventure with special guest Tyler Hupp.
Hello.
Tyler, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
So we are not super familiar with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, so then this is your thing. How about you just give us the tiniest little spiel about what JoJo Bizarre Adventure is?
Okay, so first of all, I'm showing you all the anime. It was originally a manga, and the manga was first published in 1987.
Ooh.
So it's a
okay.
decently old classic manga, heavily influenced by the Fist of the North Star, which is mostly survives in memes to this day, but it's a very old 80s anime, very 80s. And JoJo's got adapted into so the manga has gone on, is continuing. Hirohiko Araki, who wrote it, is still writing it, decades later, and they're on part 8. But parts 1 through 5 have gotten an anime adaptation, which is beloved. And then it didn't really come to America until the anime. And that was not an accident, which we can talk about later. But basically, it has become pervasive in anime culture and meme culture, and there's just a lot, because there's so much of it, and it's bizarre, which is, titular. It's in the title. It's right there in the name. People flock to it, and there's all sorts of out of context quotes and memes and references and things people string along. But yeah, no. So it's from the 80s. It was originally a manga, and it changes a lot. So with what I show you, if it does not seem in line with what you were thinking, it's possible that you're thinking of a later part, because it just completely changes. So on that note, what do you three know or think you know about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? Like, even just guesses based on what little you've seen.
So we've had some conversations about this. So I am expecting the complete unexpected. I'm aware of maybe vampires. I think there are vampires. I would be so happy if there were vampires. We also introduced that there are some less kind things directed towards people and dogs.
Yeah, the dog thing is insurmountable to some, and that is valid, but it is weirdly a prevalent part that continues solidly into part 4. Never get attached to a dog in JoJo's. Generally, no animals at all, although no turtle has been harmed to date, and the cats have about a 50% they're okay rate.
Okay, well.
Yeah, it's grim, but the fact that it's so grim and so many people still watch it is a testament to the rest of the show. But
I do have to take a second now that he's fully here to put Keegan on blast and say, see, Keegan, that's how you warn a motherfucker that some horrible violence is about to occur to beloved household pets.
I didn't remember that was the first thing that happened. It had been a long time since I had seen that, and as soon as I saw it, I'm like, ooh, that's gonna go bad. So I don't think I ever heard of this before you brought it up ever. I may have seen memes and just don't know where they came from, more than likely. The other one you mentioned, the Fist of the North Star, I've only heard because at our local game shop, they had some incredibly ancient DVDs for sale, and that was one of them.
That's delightful. So for the Fist of the North Star, is most famous through the one specific meme, Omae wa mo shinderu. Nani? And then he explodes. Whereas, like, you are already dead. And then he's like, what? And then he dies. And that is very... I don't know that specifically happens in the first few episodes, but that sort of dynamic of, like, you've already lost is quintessential JoJo's.
Okay.
It's very anime. Like, that's really all I can say about it, is that it is bizarre and it is anime.
When did the anime begin?
That's a good question. I have the wiki open. The
Smart
anime, there was an OVA, and then there was a movie for the first part, and then a TV series. So let's go to the TV series. Dates. Give me dates. Okay. Yeah, it aired in 2016.
Oof.
And has so the first part aired in 2016. Second part aired in 2016 to 2017. They ran right into each other, like one solid season. They're actually one season on Netflix, even though they are two distinct parts of the anime and the manga.
Was it made specifically for Netflix?
No. This was made. I could probably find publishing information, but it was made in Japan. It's on the typical anime channels, and then came over on, like, Crunchyroll and all the anime streaming sites, and then they did make a dub of the first 3 parts, which are on Netflix. The 4th part and the 5th part do not have dubs and are only on, like, other streaming services. But yeah, so part 2 aired in 2017. 2016 to 2017. Part 3 aired in 2017. So they basically ran the first 3 parts in a row.
Gotcha.
And then there was a bit of and then they ran into part 4 didn't happen until 2018. So they were pretty routinely making the anime. Part 4 ran through 2019, and then in 2019 they started part 5, and part 5 has run through 2020. And they have not yet confirmed part 6, but part 5 did very well. So the thought is that they're definitely going to make a part 6 anime, but no confirmation has happened.
So get us ready for this episode or string of episodes we're going to watch.
Okay, so I think, because you said about an hour, and the first 3 episodes of part 1, Phantom Blood is the name of it. They all have names, which is pretty fun. The first 3 episodes tell a pretty good story. Like, I think that if it ends at a weird place if you end after the second episode, and there's so many good points in the third episode that are, important for the rest of the show. So it's about an hour and 7 minutes if you watch the first 3 parts. Aaron does win a medal. There are vampires. Because it sort of started out as like a Helsing, sort of Van Helsing spin-off, with a little bit more of an emphasis on punching. But if you watch the first episode, your first thought is going to be, this is like an Elizabethan romp. This is just Victorian England countryside. Like, what is why there's no vampires? And then in part 3, you'll be like, oh.
So it's like
the third
from dusk
episode
till
will
dawn, essentially.
It ramps up, and kudos to Araki for packaging something so bizarre and really just folding you into it like a gentle meringue. The first episode will feel normal, and then the third episode will be just completely bizarre, and it's a gradient. Like, it builds into it. And honestly, in my opinion, it just gets weirder after that. But we don't have time for that.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I think we'll get a taste, though.
Yeah. 2 things. 1, names are indeed great. And 2, the reward Aaron has for there being vampires in it are that there are vampires in it. It is its own reward.
And
It is. It really is.
That's everything we need.
All right. Well, I think that's enough for us to jump in.
Hey guys, it's me again. I just wanted to check in this week. Still no advertisers, maybe there never will be, but I'm perfectly happy just giving you a cause to support. So we are still recovering here from the derecho, the storm that rolled through, and one of the organizations that was really helpful in that recovery process was Operation Barbecue Relief. It's a super great program. So they go to places where there are like natural disasters happening and where people need help, where they've been displaced. Right now, they are especially paying attention to areas where COVID has been particularly bad. They've served 8 million meals and have almost 30 restaurants on board with them, and have kept just shy of 300 restaurant employees employed despite COVID shutdowns in their state. So it's just something that's really near and dear to my heart. And they were here in our local area right after that storm rolled through, helping people who were without power, whose food had gone bad, to get food. They have a GoFundMe where you can donate to them, and all of that goes to help feed people who are in need in the moment and to help keep those restaurant workers employed. So if you have a little bit of extra to play with this week, I couldn't recommend it more. And if you don't, as always, we still love you so much. We're still so grateful that you're here listening with us, and I'll talk to you again next week.
And we're back. So we just watched JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. We watched the first 3 episodes, and it had a nice complete arc. Thank you for making us watch the 3 episodes, because after episode 1, I was like, bitch, what did I just watch?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'll just get us at least briefly started with kind of summing up what we just saw. So I'll talk about the first episode, because I had the most feelings about the first episode.
Okay.
So there is a guy who his carriage went off a cliff. His wife died with the baby clutched in in her arms. Sorry, use the proper pronouns. She died, and her baby was still alive, and the father wasn't dead and met up with this very conniving and just no empathy whatsoever human being who was just going to steal all of the riches from this couple. And he essentially had this promise where he's like thanked for saving them, even though he did nothing. And we're all like, as an audience, like, what the hell are we witnessing? But whatever. So fast forward 12 years. So we've got 12 or 13-year-old boys. The son of the nobleman who fell off the cliff is just he's a pathetic human being, and we're all meant to see that. And then the son of the conniving man, who's about the same age somehow, he's just the worst. And we get to see that very well. They get put together because of a promise that the nobleman made to the conniving old guy that's like, hey, I'm going to take care of you. So then,
because the conniving old guy dies. That's important.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So that happens. The conniving old guy dies. The young boy is pushed up against this family, and it's just the worst for the son of the nobleman. So let's start assigning names, because it's Joseph Joestar, I think, which
it is Jonathan. It is
Jonathan Joestar.
Okay. Jonathan Joestar, who is JoJo. Like, I remember JoJo.
Yeah.
He is essentially the main character, and then the conniving boy, Dio, which I cannot forget his name. He is brought into the family, and everything that JoJo holds dear, Dio is just trying to corrupt and make the absolute worst. And God, that hit me to the core. And I think everybody is meant to hate Dio, but I would like to say I hated Dio just a little more than everybody else.
You get a lot of continued opportunities to continue hating Dio. Don't worry.
Yes, for sure. So that's essentially the first episode, is they're really setting up this hatred. And there are so many examples. We don't need to touch on every single one of them. Let's leave that be. I'm going to hand it off to Keegan, who's going to dive into the second episode, where we get a little bit more.
All right, so in the second episode, it's 7 years later. The one kind of thing I want to mention from the first episode that we didn't get was Dio kind of like beat on JoJo for like the whole episode, except for the very end, where even though he was beaten badly, JoJo came back and beat him, and they kind of have a reoccurring line of, even if you knock him down, he'll come back twice as hard. Which kind of is a reoccurring sort of theme. So it's 7 years later. They're in college, I guess. I don't
Mhm.
know.
Yeah, I think they're
it's kind of
graduating at 19.
weird.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah, they're graduating
right?
at 19. Yes. Way to go. Good job. And Dio has decided to pretend to be nice for the last 7 years, which I just can't see happening, but all right. And so they are pretending to be friends with each other, even though he has a plot to kill everybody and take over the family and, other mustache twirling villain sort of things. So he goes and gets some poison and he's poisoning the dad. And JoJo's like, I know you're poisoning him. And he figures it out, but he's like, I don't know what you're poisoning with. So he goes to London to figure out what the poison is and gets into a fight with a bunch of thugs, but proves himself to be a gentleman. So the thugs become his friends.
Oh, and let's not forget the main
no.
thug, Keegan. Let's
Yeah.
not forget him,
Yes,
our
what-
good friend
what is his name?
Oreo
Speedwagon.
Robert
Yes, my
Speedwagon.
favorite part.
Speedwagon,
100% famous. My favorite
When
part.
he revealed his name, I
Yeah, I
literally
paused.
just shut the top of my laptop.
That is the first.
I can't
Yeah.
have Oreo Speedwagon.
Can I
Okay,
just say that
anyway.
is the first of many delightful, delicious musical references that continue.
Yeah.
And
Please
there's
continue,
more.
Keegan.
The density increases, but yes.
Yeah, I was like, oh, this is awesome. That's awesome. While he's in London figuring out what this poison is and getting the antidote, Dio is experimenting with this mask that he wants to use to murder JoJo for some reason. He's like, oh, this will work perfectly. I don't know why he thinks it'll work perfectly, but okay. So he's just kind of walking around, and apparently he's an alcoholic now. And he gets attacked by some drunks, and he shoves the mask onto one of them to kill him, and the guy becomes a vampire, and he's kind of saved by the dawn happening. And so he gets home from after the next night, and JoJo's there to confront him about the murdering his own father and trying to murder JoJo's father, and Dio stabs JoJo's father and puts on the mask and becomes a vampire. And I believe that's the end of the second episode.
I think that happens in the third, but
Yeah.
It's real close. I think it transfers to the third halfway in that scene.
Yeah, so the third episode is basically their big final fight. They try and shoot Dio, and it doesn't work because he's a vampire and he's sucking the blood out of people and regenerating and whatever. And eventually JoJo is like, fuck it, everyone's dead and life is meaningless, and I'm descending into despair in a way that's totally reasonable. So I'm just gonna light my house on fire, and then I'll drag this motherfucker into the fire with me, and hopefully that will kill him because the fire seems to hurt him pretty bad. And they have a very a very sort of, it harkens back. So I have a very weird anime experience. It harkens back to me to OG Dragon Ball Z, where the fight is really extended and lots of people are screaming and there's hair stuff happening and it's very weird. People are pulling, he pulls a knife out of his own shoulder and tries to stab Dio with it. What the fuck ever. Anyway, they end up in the fire in the house. Everything explodes. The house crumbles down around them. JoJo is ejected from this.
Miraculously unharmed.
Yes, miraculously, completely unharmed. With
no burns.
Blood
Even his clothes are fine.
Yep, it's perfect, which is great. Oreo Speedwagon, fucking Christ, cradles him lovingly to his breast and goes, "Oh my God, you've survived!" And then we get an epilogue, it's not actually post credits, but a post credits scene, where there's people coming back through and picking things up, and I think they specifically go to pick up the mask, right?
Yes.
And Dio,
the poison seller.
Yeah, his name is later revealed to be Wang Chung.
Oh no!
No.
Yeah, I don't like that at all.
The band Wang Chung.
Yeah, no, that's not. That doesn't make it better.
No,
it's still. Yeah, I know.
Creepy purple, desiccated hand reaches out and is like, "Wah!" And then sucks all of the blood and life out of the apothecary, and that's the end. That's
I
it.
want to know, was the hand thing, did that come out before or after the Teenage Ninja Turtle movies that Shredder did that exact same thing?
What movie would that be?
That would be like the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, like from the 90s.
Then much after, because the show.
Yeah, because this was 87. That this
Yeah,
was
but
on.
the manga happened before that, so I didn't know if that scene was in that manga.
There's a constant cyclical nature of JoJo's where you're unsure if, because Araki loves to be inspired by pop culture, specifically American pop culture, but he also accidentally inspires a lot of things. So it's a
Gotcha.
50-50 whether or not he's inspired by something else or it's inspired by him. Like he did Groundhog Day after Groundhog Day in one of his parts, but like he did some poses that then got picked up by like fashion magazines, copied poses from JoJo's, but he's copied plenty of poses from like Vogue, and like it is bizarre and only continues to be so.
Well, we'll
Bizarre.
see if he has any characters named after Vanilla Ice at some point.
He does. There's a character named, well, the character's named Vanilla Ice.
Oh gosh.
Part 3. He is
All
also
right.
a vampire. Yeah.
That tracks.
They don't see the best part is they never like the musical reference seldom has anything to do with the actual character, and they never stop to explain it or like play it off as a joke. It's just that's his name. He's named Vanilla Ice.
So
See, it almost.
this is
I'm sorry.
one
Go
of-
ahead. Go ahead.
This is one of the things that like struck me about this show that made it like, okay, so I'm gonna sort of play my cards here. This was a sort of challenging watch for me. It wasn't like abhorrent. I wasn't like, oh my god, I can't wait to get this over with. But it was challenging. And for me, like the biggest thing is, I know you warned us. You did exactly what you should have. That it like the tone is weird and that it switches a lot and that there's a lot of kind of like movement in it. But I was kind of caught between it having like a soap opera vibe where there isn't a lot of nuance to any given character. Not really. They're all pretty one-dimensional.
Heavy-handed.
It tries to
Definitely.
pretend that there's nuance to them and like there's interesting motives for the things that they're doing, but there's not. There's really not. And like, I don't watch football because watching young men beating the shit out of each other with like weird adolescent competitiveness and rage is like not terribly enticing to me. And that's a lot of sort of what this show circles around. And I just like wasn't prepared for the tone. Like it tries to present itself as like this very dramatic, like almost telenovela style, like drama where everything is super overdone. And then it's also like, maybe supposed to be funny. Like I think it thinks it's funny, but
It's unclear. I think the creators are aware that people find it incredibly funny, but I don't know if it's how much of it is into. I don't think you're supposed to. I don't think you're supposed to laugh, and that's what makes it funny. But they're aware that it is complete, and it only gets more and more ridiculous. Like
okay, the thing
This is the non-ridiculous part.
yes, no, this is the part that makes sense. Yeah,
we have Ario Speedwagon the first time we meet him before we know that his name is a complete joke in and of itself, and he takes off his hat that has blades for a brim and says, I can take you out with a tip of my hat. And I'm like, yo, you roasted a dog like 4 minutes ago. Am I supposed to be laughing? Like, this is truly ludicrous. Like this.
And the crazy part is he never does that hat thing again. He's in dozens of episodes and he never does the hat thing again.
How does that not come up? Anyway.
Right. So, okay.
He mostly just narrates and cries for the rest of the... But we love him.
So I want to talk
he
about
actually
the
was my
hat.
favorite character, probably.
Oh, he's a treat.
So that hat, like, I was thinking, okay, so they decapitated a vampire in order to kill it, and so before the fire was introduced, I was like, oh, this is like Chekhov's gun. Like, we've got this hat that can decapitate somebody really easy by throwing it. It's going to come in. Like, JoJo's going to distract him. He's going to be in so much pain. And Ario Speedwagon's going to come in from behind and slice his head off. I was so expecting this. And I was like, I've got this figured out.
Good narrative.
It is the opposite of it. Talk about, like, getting rid of tropes. It is the opposite of a Chekhov's gun in that it never comes back and you desperately want it to.
I mean, the hat itself is a reference to a James Bond villain.
Yes.
Odd Job. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I mean, they do Chekhov's gun the statue that Dio is impaled on at the end of the 3rd episode. They show the statue dramatically several times.
Right.
But it's just
They
not
show
as
so much stuff dramatically.
That's
like
true.
literally, they show books dramatically. They show like all sorts of things dramatically.
On it didn't come back. I mean,
Can we-
he stood by it for the weird bad scene that made me feel very icky. But that's it. That's it for the tree. We took a lot of time for it.
So,
We
okay,
did.
I want to talk about these drama scenes because one thing I really noticed and loved is they have a lot of like 80s shapes. Does anybody else notice that? Like the triangles, and it was like early 90s, late 80s shapes everywhere.
I have a whole thing about the
Colors too.
You know
Yeah.
how I am.
Yeah.
Yes. Can we have a moment for that? Because this.
Yeah,
is...
we're gonna have Rachel's art corner. Here we go.
Okay.
No! We need like a musical stinger for Rachel's art corner. Okay, so the vibe, one of the things that I do respect about the show, and again, difficult watch for me, but one of the things that I really respect is the way that the animation style sort of plays into the type of story that they're telling. Like, we get a much bubblier animation style in the first episode where things are, like you said, like it's sort of like that Victorian romp. It's got almost kind of not that I would consider it a romp, but it's got almost kind of a like, I don't know, like a Pride and Prejudice-y feel to it when you dive in at the beginning, right? And so we have all of these backgrounds that are like watercolored and are like a little bit softer, and the shapes of the actual people are way less exaggerated. So as we move into the next episode, where it like starts off in the beginning like a sports anime, which is fascinating. We get a lot of the like shapes and movement that you would expect from a sports anime. Like the way that they use lines for motion is really fascinating and emulates a lot of that style. And then as we move on and it becomes clear that this is actually like a supernatural fighting thing, right? The shapes get more and more exaggerated. When he is standing in London in like Ogre Alley or Ogre Row or whatever.
It was literally called Ogre Alley, yeah.
Yes. So his fucking thigh muscles.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
Equilateral triangles stick out. Like, it's the weirdest fucking shit I've ever seen. But it also brought me back to, again, OG Dragon Ball Z. It had that same kind of like flat coloring. The shading later on in the 3rd episode starts to come back in, but in that portion, because things were moving so quickly, you really didn't get a lot of shading. You still had some of that like watercolory background to it, but that fades more and more as you like progress through the 3rd episode, and it becomes more about the combat and less about the place where they are. Like, the way that they change up their art style and use it is really interesting and clearly very, very thoughtful, and did a lot for me to redeem this show. That said, I didn't really like the style very much.
Yeah, me neither.
It's Garrett. It's certainly aggressive. And
It is. Really impressive.
Araki wrote the first part when he was 27 and did not know how to draw men well. He really only knew how to draw really big buff men, and poorly. And so it's not until like the later parts that we start to get people shaped like people, and that's because Araki learned how to do it.
Really did not know anything about women, because there is one woman in these 3 episodes. She gets 4.5 minutes of screen time.
Valid
Part of it is
criticism.
to be sexually assaulted.
It does take him a while to get women that are good characters, and that's a valid criticism.
We do get a corpse of a woman right at the beginning. Does that count?
How can you not? It's us and the gays. We're there to kill and motivate. That's it. If you murder us, it's a motivation, and then you can move on. Yeah, it's good.
So, like, I don't know, in style, what the only anime I've seen that kind of like, to me, it was kind of like art style wise, and in sort of the graphicness of it is Berserk. I don't know if anybody has watched that.
I haven't watched it, but I'm familiar with it, sort of.
You know what, Keegan?
But it's much more serious.
I think it also has some of the like, I think it's like the line quality of it and also some of the exaggeration of it also harkened me back a little bit to Cowboy Bebop.
Okay.
Like, if you, it's a lot
if you
more
like got people with talent
exaggerated.
to do it, maybe.
Right. It's a lot more exaggerated in JoJo's than it was in Cowboy Bebop, and I think it was used much more carefully in Cowboy Bebop. But I think some of the like exaggeration to show a person's character traits was definitely like when we get to the second episode and we split up into the sports anime, we have Dio and we have JoJo. And JoJo is like a complete triangle of a human being. His shoulders are like 3 times as wide as his hips are. He's got like this big lunky head. He is clearly meant to be like a powerhouse, like a juggernaut type figure, right? And then he shows that immediately as he rushes and rushes and rushes through people. And then we move to Dio, who is a lot less exaggerated in that form, although he's clearly still supposed to be like, I am an ideal male physique. He's a much more like sort of lithe figure. Like he's slimmer and clearly more dexterous. And then we see that immediately, right? Like instead of punching through a bunch of people like I'm the juggernaut bitch, he just avoids them. And that's very much like indicative of their characters in a way that's interesting. Like, do you face problems head on, or do you try and like sidewind your way around it into some bullshit? And then is also reflected in just the way that their physical forms are drawn. And that I think harkens back to me to Cowboy Bebop. Just like the way that this person looks will tell you something about how you expect them to fight.
I don't know. Like, this was a lot of ugly people in a lot of ways. Like, the characters were ugly, their personalities a lot of times were ugly, a lot of the subject matter was ugly, so there were some difficulties I had watching it.
But you know what I actually really liked about this is when they lean into the weird and the bizarre, that's where it picks up its steam, and that's where it gets good. It was the first... It's trying to get you into these characters and first of all really hate somebody and really like somebody, and they lean into that a lot. But once you get to like vampires and hats that are like blades in them, that's where it's like, okay, shit, this can get actually pretty good. And that's where I started to appreciate it a lot more. Like by the end of the first episode, I was like gripping things and like, I hate this boy. What am I watching? But once we got to like the second and third episode where it was just fighting and just crazy stupidness, I was like, okay, I'm on board, whatever.
Can I just say that, so first of all, part 1 is very few people's favorite. They're figuring out the art style, they're figuring out the storytelling. It's short and awkward and really, none of the characters get terribly well nuanced, but they do a really good job of having more complicated backstories than he killed my dog and I hate him. They certainly, it gets more complicated, nuanced. Like they go like, there's a part in part 4 where there's like absent father relationship, but like he shows up and he's so much older than the typical father figure, and like, but you're a teen and how do you deal with that? Like there's interesting things that come up later, but so each part does not continue to focus on Jonathan Joestar. Jonathan Joestar is featured only in the first 9 episodes, part 1, Phantom Blood. The second part is his grandson in around World War II fighting ancient Aztec vampire gods.
Good. Excellent.
Okay.
Cool.
Part 3 is Jonathan's great-great-grandson, the grandson of Joseph Joestar is the second one. Then Jotaro Kujo is the third JoJo. And at this point, they introduce something called... and another thing, there's a breathing magic that gets introduced in the very next episode where if you take a really deep breath, your bloodstream can harness the power of the sun and help you punch vampires to death.
What?
Something that you're one episode away from. Also, it can do just about anything you want. It can heal your wounds. It can make water stand up in... Like, it can keep water in a glass when it's upside down. It's kind of like Hunter x Hunter Nen, where it does whatever you want it to if you do breathing.
We have
part 3. In part 3, you have in part 2. My favorite moment is, and it's very much the JoJo back and forth. There's a moment where JoJo throws a grenade at this enemy vampire, and the enemy vampire bats it away confidently. And then he says, "Look closer." And the grenade was tied to the pins of 5 other grenades that were planted on the vampire previously. And by knocking it away, he pulled all the pins on them. Part 3, they introduced something called stands, which are supernatural magic ghosts that you can control that embody your fighting spirit and have superpowers.
So it gets out of control. Really quickly.
And then later on they introduce that ghosts do exist, maybe aliens, although that's unclear. So part 3 is a trek across Asia to get to Egypt on foot, very around the world in 80 days. Part 4 is a suburban slice of life.
Yeah.
About teenagers going to school and also fighting evil stand users in their neighborhood, but it's very suburban. There's an episode where they just eat Italian food and it's delicious, and that's the whole episode. Part 5 is about Italian gangsters circa 2001, and they're all wearing Gucci and like posing on yachts in Italy. And part 6 takes place entirely in a women's prison. Part 7 is actually a universal reset. So the entire, it's an alternate universe from the first 6 parts.
Oh my God.
In which it is in the Wild West. And Johnny Joestar, a paraplegic former horse jockey, teams up with his Italian cowboy best friend to go on a horse race across America called Steel Ball Run in order to retrieve the body parts of Jesus Christ, which he will be able to use to heal his legs.
Oh my.
Wow. So you can see it just gets weirder and weirder.
Yes.
So
it almost there's a scene from The Usual Suspects where one of the people, it turns out, is just looking around the room and using random items to tell a story. It feels like that.
So let's wrap up with some final thoughts. I would have to say, I like where this is going, and if I didn't, I have two kind of minds about this. For one, I liked where it was going, and once it started getting weirder, I started getting more drawn in. And as you're describing, it gets weirder and weirder. I'm excited about where it's going to go, but I think you've accurately stated that these first 3 episodes are just especially the first episode, kind of a slog to get into it. But the payoff.
That's why I hesitated to start you at the beginning.
Right. Right.
It's a fair place to start.
For sure. We have to know what's going on, because if you throw us into episode 7, we're like, what the actual hell am I watching?
Yes.
So, does anybody else have anything they wanted to share before we wrap this guy up?
It was exactly as corny as I expected. The sum total of my knowledge going into this was this show corny as fuck. And then I got into it and I was like, yep, there it is. I really enjoyed seeing, but it was Dio, because that's become such a meme. So it's cool for me to know where that came from. I don't know that I would continue with this, but I don't feel worse for having watched it, and it
didn't actively harm you.
It's part of a thing. Everybody I interact with is a huge nerd, right? So there is a 50-50 shot that they have seen and are into this show, and if they have seen and are into this show, they're probably very into it. I think it's one of those things where it either super grabs people at Tyler, or it doesn't really grab people.
There's no visual medium for this podcast, but I am pointing to a framed picture of myself in JoJo's cosplay that is hanging on my wall behind me.
Nice.
Awesome.
So yeah, I think it's just nice to have that kind of look in at sort of what people are talking about, and knowing okay, this is the thing that grabbed you. This is kind of a little morsel of what it's about, and then knowing that it just gets exponentially weirder, I can kind of extract.
I think it's pretty safe to say nobody watches JoJo's for their treatment of animals or the nuances of the and honestly, not really for the art style either. People watch JoJo's so they can watch someone watch a ridiculous battle that makes no sense while somebody loudly shouts the name of their stand, which is also a pop culture reference. They just want weirdly dressed anime characters posing severely and shouting "sticky fingers."
Excellent.
Gotcha.
Or my favorite is there's a stand called Spice Girl. And whenever she uses her ability, the user shouts, "Wannabe!"
Oh, no.
And it's delightful, right? It's just it just makes you giggle. And that's a lot of why I like it so.
Right.
So I break down the TV shows that I see into kind of 3 categories. 1, I see part of it, I never want to see any again. 2, I see part of it and I'm interested enough to go on the wiki and read all the synopsises of the episodes and then be done with it. And 3, actually watch the show. And it definitely falls into category number 2.
I can see that. If it was, so this is my thing. If it were shorter and more like with Pushing Daisies, it was something that you can it's just 2 seasons. There's something more approachable about it. And knowing that there's bizarre stuff coming, I'd be like, you know what? I'll give it a shot. But when something gets really long, unless it's say something like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where I
ding ding
get really into it. I don't know. There's something about something being really long that I'm just oh, I don't know.
Right. And I mean, as is something this is not a beginner anime, and I'm not saying that to be elitist. It is just, it's hard. It's strong in a lot of ways, and it's garish in a lot of ways, and it certainly does not start out great, and it has a lot of problems that are pretty hard to look past. But it's not an easy anime to start, and there's a lot of it, so on your own it's difficult. I was shown JoJo's I watched it with other people who had seen it before. And then now I have shown JoJo's to other people and watched it with them so I can sort of gauge their reactions and how much they're enjoying it. So it's a little less lonely like that.
Right.
And helps them get through. The third part is a slog, and I'll be the first to admit that. Some people love it. It's some people's favorite, but it's long.
Yeah.
I can see it being a really interesting and fun kind of group activity because then the parts that are difficult or long, you can kind of as a group be oh, well, we're getting through this together. And the parts that are entertaining, you can laugh with each other. And so you can kind of take any sort of those burdens or highs and make them a little bit better.
Okay, fair. I would watch this show with a drinking game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh my God, yes.
If everybody were gathered together in somebody's basement and there was a tray of snacks that I could go completely pilfer as soon as a dog was on screen, I think that I could watch this with a drinking game. I think that would be the perfect situation for the amount of bizarre it is, because I can envision that the longer you play said game, the better the show gets.
Yes. That would be ideal. So I think that's about all we have time for, though. So thank you, Tyler, for sharing this with us.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
you are
man.
a Gemini hero.
I've plagued you with this curse of knowledge.
No, now we have a drinking game.
Honestly, every time somebody strikes a ridiculous pose, anytime someone makes a musical reference...
No, you would die. You would die.
Okay.
I have corporeal
take a little
form.
sip, just a tiny little baby sip. Every time a grown man cries. Every time...
in the room, or
yes, in the room where you physically are.
All right, thanks again. We'll see you guys later.
Bye, friends.
Bye.
Bye.